First, we want to improve the information and the tools that parents need to make the changes that are desired in their families. The second is that we have to improve the quality of food in our schools. That's where kids are eating many of their meals, and we have to do a better job of making sure that that food is quality.
School lunch guidelines are not going down so well with many kids across the country.
All right, Village. So today we're going to be talking about one of the most controversial policies in the history of the U.S. And no, I am not talking about Reaganomics, but trust me, that video is coming up very, very soon. But today we're going to be talking about Michelle Obama's initiatives, and more clearly the Obama administration initiatives of the Free Healthy Food Act to try to get kids to eat a lot more healthier when it comes to school lunches. Because God be it that Americans don't want their kids to eat healthy. Before the school lunch program came into effect in the 1940s by President Harry Truman, basically school lunches for a time were up to local state interests and the state governments. Up until the 1900s, charities as well as private organizations helped, bring lunch to schools as well as to school children oftentimes whenever they weren't able to afford it, because up until that time there weren't really any structure from the state or local school districts onto provide lunch for the kids. Now going into the 1920s and 1930s, there was a new push to provide a structure to this problem, and so pretty much local and state governments started implementing their own school lunch programs, and oftentimes some of them will get federal dollars to institute them, while other programs use local funds to be able to provide lunches to their own students, especially when we talk about local taxes. And while that might have been good at the time, herein lies the problem, because just like how a lot of school funding is dictated by the local property taxes, you can have a lot of disparities within that when you talk about, concentrated poverty, wealth disparities, this, that, and the third. You're going to have the same thing when you talk about school lunches, because if you live in a poor area, then you're not going to pull as much money to provide school lunches as, say, one of the most richest areas in the city, oftentimes being white. And at that point, you're going to have a lot of disparities, not only in school lunches, but also the nutritional value of it, the amount a student can get, as well as just in general, not being able to successfully feed your kids. And if you can't do that, then how could you expect them to get through a lesson of algebra or arithmetic or whatever they taught back in the day? Now, in 1946, there was a new spur by the government as well as by Harry S. Truman to try and to not only fairly fund healthy school lunches, but also make sure it was free and low cost to allow even people who are below the federal poverty line to be able to feed their kids during the day. This culminated in Harry S. Truman signing the Richard B. Russell School Lunch Program Act, being able to do this, as well as, creating subsidies for schools to participate in this program. It was then expanded upon 20 years later by Lyndon B. Johnson with the Childhood Nutrition Act, and basically not only starting the school breakfast program with the same, initiatives as well as the same requirements, but also having more stricter requirements on what nutritional, quality that the food that was supposed to be served in these programs had. While the National School Lunch Program was a permanent program, they basically had to be reauthorized every 5 years. And so when we get into the late 2000s, it was said to be reauthorized, in 2009, but basically through several bills, it was able to last until 2010, until Obama and Senate and House leaders wanted to pass a new type of investment into the program. In 2010, the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act was signed into law to not only invest the most money has seen since the inception of the school lunch program, but also increase the national standards on healthy food that was supposed to be served to not only just all children, but low-income children. It expanded the requirements that children need to meet to be able to participate in this program, but also expanded the community eligibility provisions, which allowed high poverty area school districts to provide individual lunches for a certain group of kids, who met this requirement. But pretty much it allowed the whole school districts to provide free lunches to all children, because in general, if you go to a high poverty school, most of your children are going to be experiencing poverty, unfortunately. Now, this act wasn't just to increase the federal requirement for, free and reduced lunch. Oftentimes, it's done in partnership with the First Lady's Let's Move campaign.
Let's Move is going to take families out of their isolation and give them the nationwide support that they need in a whole range of industries to get their kids on track to live healthier lives, to eat right, to get more exercise, and to be ready to face the challenges of the future.
Now, if you grew up in early 2000, then you remember the Worldwide Day of Play. Basically, Nickelodeon would just black out their screens or orange out their screens, as well as the fact that you were probably growing up with the NFL Let's Play 60 campaign. And while those initiatives were started before Michelle Obama actually became the First Lady, these were some of the few programs that she partnered with during her time as First Lady because they had a lot of heavily influence and reach. Because what kid wasn't watching SpongeBob on Nickelodeon when they were about 5 or 8 years old? Or we all remember that Cam Newton commercial where he was being talked up by that white kid saying that he was going to take his spot, make him a second string quarterback and all that. And basically 10 to about 13 years later, that kid's dream actually came true. That was a joke probably done in poor taste, but I digress. The main provisions that really heated a lot of people over the years was a provision that they now had to start serving specific, nutritional guidelines, which included the addition of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and reduced levels of sodium, sugar, and unhealthy fats. And this was done to align with the guidelines of the Dietary Guidelines of America. And as these guidelines have been enacted for the past at least 100 years, there was an increased focus on this because childhood obesity was increasingly rising, especially in the 2010s. Because as you know, between the 1960s to the 2010s, we've had more unhealthy food in circulation. And I'm not just really talking about fast food. I'm just talking about unhealthy food items like candy bars, chips, soda, as well as the fact that a lot of these food items were not just marketed to adults, but these were marketed to kids. Because only in America is when you can see a McDonald's commercial, a Sprite commercial, a Kit Kat commercial, as well as a diabetes commercial, all in the same commercial break. A little dark humor right there. But in all seriousness, childhood obesity rates have been steadily rising even before 2010. And has continued to rise even after that. And while I'm not saying children are completely just dumb, they don't make the best choices when it comes to nutrition or to having foresight. Michelle Obama, as well as President Obama, because this was pretty much his legislation as well, we're trying to do was to at least curb this notion, because we're one of the richest nations in the world. Our kids are basically having a higher chance of getting diabetes before they even turn, 18. But this didn't stop critics, especially conservative pundits, from taking a little crap on the program from its onset. One argument is food waste, because throughout the years this program was implemented, many people often complained that the increased, requirements to continually to serve food, veggies, whole grains, low fat, milk and all that, has caused kids to really just throw away the items and increase the amount of food waste. However, other groups of people have said that the portion sizes weren't enough.
My friends are at the corner store getting junk so they don't waste away.
They borrowed the hit song We're Young, but wrote their own lyrics to voice their complaints.
We are hungry.
The YouTube video was produced by high school students and teachers in Kansas. It shows volleyball players collapsing and students stuffing their lockers with junk food. Their message, they're hungry.
Well, this is a great product of some small town students and their teachers.
Tim Hulskamp is their congressman. He's also concerned about new school lunch guidelines that limit calories in school meals. For kindergarten through 5th grade, it's 650 calories. 6th to 8th grade, 700. And 9th to 12th, 850 calories.
The decisions about the lunchroom should be made there, should be made with the parents in the school district, not some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C.
The new rules are the first major overhaul of school meals in 15 years.
Now, addressing to the issues they brought up in this video, and I sympathize with them because I've had many friends at lunch felt like they didn't have enough food at the end of the day. But one thing that we need to consider, one of the statistics that they popped up in the video, was that kids need about 5,000 to 6,000 calories per day. One thing you need to consider is this came from a sports nutrition guide, basically saying that student athletes who are teens needs about 5,000 to 6,000 calories per day, not the average student, who I will argue most school children in America fall under. Healthychildren.org, they have said that teen boys, keep in mind, need about 2,800 calories per day to be able to function compared to just, teen girls who need about 2,200 calories per day to function. Keep in mind, that doesn't just include a lunch, that includes breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You can make the argument that, kids who come from a low SES background, as well, who come from families who aren't able to put food on the table at times, might not have access to a healthy lunch or dinner or breakfast. But at the end of the day, I don't think the answer is giving them a high calorie lunch and then having them crash right before their 2 p.m. volleyball match in PE or dodgeball, whatever the kids play nowadays. I'm not trying to rip these kids a new one, because at the end of the day, I understand it. Like, there was a lot of times I wanted more for school lunch. A lot of times I wasn't hungry, but I wish I had a little bit more, pasta or chicken nuggets or fries or something put on my plate. Now, connecting this to the food waste argument that a lot of conservatives like to keep bringing up, saying that, oh, kids don't like the food, it's disgusting, it's nasty, let me provide 2 points. As the USDA provide guidelines on what schools can offer and give them tips on how to really flex the guidelines and the restrictions, it's really up to schools on what to, provide and how to provide it. And that is not to say that schools don't have budget issues, because definitely school budgets have, stretched and have been stretched in for years and years and years, even after this initiative was taking place. There are even some points that schools don't even have full kitchens to provide food. And in that case, they have to offsite the services to a contractor, or just have the bare minimum staff at schools just heat up meals they receive from the federal government or, their contractor. During the hype of the Obama administration, schools only were able to receive about $2.5 from each free school meal that they served. And quite frankly, that is not enough to run a staff or kitchen. And you can blame the administration for that, for not providing enough funding to be able to implement these guidelines. But at the end of the day, schools have the last say on what's being served at lunch and can have some type of flex within that. There are proven ways that you can serve healthy foods to kids that taste good as well as very beneficial to them. I don't think it's just fair to put all this blame on Michelle Obama, because at the end of the day, this wasn't just her initiative. This was also President Obama's, as well as this was passed by Congress and the Senate, as well as in the fact that there's nothing wrong with telling people, hey, your kids need to eat a lot healthier. And if you're receiving federal funding for these meals, then you're going to have restrictions for it. To my second point, when we talk about food waste as well as not enough nutritional calories, let's just think about my point earlier about we have a lot more junk food in circulation. We have an American diet problem in the US, because oftentimes we think that if we can afford it, if we can buy it, then we should be able to eat it. And we should be able to eat it now. And that has not only caused us to eat more junk food, but that has caused a whole marketing industry to push, junk food down our throats. Because like I said, it doesn't make any sense why there should be a McDonald's, Burger King commercial, soda, candy commercial right next to a commercial with diabetes. Again, a dark humor joke, but you get my point. And going on a more personal anecdote, basically my parents, told us that we're not having, junk food and all that unless it's on the weekends. And that's not saying that we can't have the occasional chips throughout the week and all that, but just going out to eat, like going out to fast food joints or restaurants, was only restricted on. And now as a 23-year-old adult who makes my own money and now is starting to learn the value of nutritional eating after 4 years of junk food, late night, monsters and all that, I will say that that's the way to go, because oftentimes it makes it think of just because you can buy some doesn't mean you should do it or eat it or whatever, but often pace yourself. This was the main point of this initiative, because Michelle Obama, I'm pretty sure, wasn't eating, broccoli, casserole, and, whole grain bread for 24/7, but basically saying that we need to pace our kids on what they eat. And while there is no longitudinal study analysis on how much food was wasted during the iteration of this, campaign, I am not going to totally disagree with conservatives, because I feel like a lot more food was wasted during this time, because I remember sometimes I will waste the food. God forbid. I knew a lot of people, back in grade school who threw out their entire plate because they didn't want this, because it was either disgusting or it was just they weren't used to having veggies. But at the end of the day, we were tricked by multi-million-dollar corporations to think that healthy eating was less fun than getting a McDonald's, burger, and B, thinking that just because we were able to buy it, as well as they got many deals like the Dollar Menu by Mickey D's or the 4 for 4 from Wendy's, that we should be able to get it whenever we want to. I think a lot of people got lost in the sauce, no pun intended, because a lot of conservatives wanted to participate in this culture war because, God forbid, they let a black woman tell them what they want to eat, which is no different than any other time in history, but I digress. The main thing I want to bring up this argument is that the point of this initiative wasn't necessarily to get better tasting food or to cater to what most parents wanted their kids to eat. The main point of this was to expand the access of free and reduced lunch to kids that really needed it. And when you put that in context to the 2008 recession that Obama had to come and deal with during his administration, you will understand a lot more kids were suffering the effects of that. Oftentimes, when a national crisis, with the exception of COVID-19, happens, we don't consider the effects that it has on kids. And as I grew up in what many people will consider the hood of South Oak Cliff, Dallas, around this era, I saw many kids struggling. Like many kids, parents got laid off from work. People were stretching their dollars. People were literally trying to, make ends meet. At that time, what a kid was eating wasn't an important factor to the fact that they were eating at all.
Before coming to the White House, the president and I lived lives like most families. 2 working parents. I was busy trying to maintain some balance, picking kids up from school, trying to get things done at work, just too busy, not enough time. And what I found myself doing was probably making up for it and being unable to cook a good meal for my kids. Going to fast food a little more than I'd like, ordering pizza, and I started to see the effects on my family, particularly my kids. It got to the point where our pediatrician basically said, you may want to make some changes. So started making those changes, short, easy changes, but they led to some really good results. So I wanted to bring the lessons that I learned to the White House.
And that's the unfortunate reality a lot of these kids grow up in. And that's what Michelle Obama or Barack Obama recognized, because as kids living in low-income situations has a higher chance of experiencing childhood obesity, i.e. because of food deserts and lack of funding in, kids' health programs in the hood, which means that I'm not saying there's no food in certain communities. I'm saying there's a lot less healthier options to have farm-to-table food in Black and brown as well as low-income communities than your standard high-income or white communities. And that's due to a lot of structural issues I'm not really going to talk about in this video because it will take a whole deep dive. And yes, I'm pretty sure somebody will mention this in the comment section in the future. Yes, white people comprise most people impoverished in this nation. But what I'm talking about, concentrated poverty as well as poverty in proportion to the population, Black and brown folk make up a good chunk of that. And we consider the fact that Black and brown folks, health is often compounded and affected by other social determinants such as stress, socioeconomic status, as well as access to quality healthcare, then you understand they are a lot more at risk to getting childhood obesity. I know I'm oversimplifying this to the T, but what I am saying is that Michelle and Barack knew what they were talking about when doing this program. They were making this for Black and brown youth who might not have the same opportunities to become healthy as their white counterparts proportionally. And even if they thought that if we could just do a sliver of things and just try to make one meal during the day, as healthy as possible, then we're probably doing a good service to some of these kids. And there's research that says they probably have. From a recent study that was done in 2020 by the University of Washington, it said that health eating indexes, which is a score that indicates, kids are going from eating unhealthy food to eating food that adheres to the nutritional guidelines set by the Obama administration. Basically, it said that scores in low-income kids increased by 31%, low to middle-income kids increased by 30%, as well as scores that came from middle to high-income kids increased by 19%, which means the program is doing what needs to be done, which is providing healthy food to those who need it the most at a reduced price, which is low-income students that might not know where the next meal may be or if they're going to get a healthy meal at all. And yes, there's a lot more research that needs to be done. It probably won't be done until at least the next decade. But what I am saying is chill off of Michelle Obama's case. She was doing the right thing. Maybe the implementation wasn't, the best, but that is true with all federal government programs. A recent example of this is how COVID-19 PPP loans were not only distributed, but also how it was forgiven, not just by a lot of your favorites in Congress, but also a lot of your favorites in American pop culture, who I will argue can pay them back. And I digress, but overall, the point I want to leave y'all with from this video is that, yes, Michelle Obama was trying to tell your kids what to eat during lunch. But at the end of the day, it wasn't just because, or she just felt like it. There's a real reason behind it, and there are a lot of issues to childhood nutrition that we still need to address, such as food deserts, having more community and child-centered health programs to really tackle the different stressors that causes obesity, as well as overall, we need to actually engage more with kids about what they're eating. Because as we've seen with this TikTok era, this, high marketing era, where pretty much kids have the whole world to their phone, they're getting mixed messages about what they need to be, who they need to be, as well as, what they need to eat in society. And at the end of the day, that is something that we need to really talk about it, especially as misinformation starts to flourish. But with that being said, that's the end of my video. So definitely follow along, like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, all that wonderful good stuff, as well as share this video if you have a friend who would love to see it. To give another quick update about this channel, I am going back to grad school pretty soon. It is T-minus in 3 months. And so with that being said, video production is going to go down because obviously I need to focus on school. Pretty much for the time being, you're going to get probably 1 video per week. And I'm still going to do a mix of commentary videos as well as reaction-based videos, especially from Jubilee, as they continue to pop out. But that's something I want to update y'all on, because as I still want to put out more content on this channel, as well as I'm trying other means of putting out content, such as my public health happy hours on my IG and TikTok. Shameless plug right there. I definitely want to, keep my studies a priority, and that's one of the things that, is going to be more prevalent coming in the near future. But with that being said, thank you for watching the video. Stay warm, stay frosty, depending on what part of the country you're in, and peace out.